What were the dominant styles of architecture in the Spanish New World?
In Spanish Latin American, Baroque styles of architecture remained popular long after it had fallen out of fashion in Europe. Throughout the 18th century, magnificent examples of Baroque architecture continued to be built in countries such as Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, and even further afield in the Philippines. The Church of Saints Sebastian and Santa Prisco, in Tascata Alarcon, Mexico, is a good example of an 18th century Baroque church heavily decorated in stucco sculpture in a popular style known as the churrigueresque. Near Tucson, Arizona, the Mission San Xavier del Bac was also built in the 18th century and reflected Spanish Baroque styles. The nearly 100-foot-long church was built using brick and mortar rather than adobe, which was commonly used by the native people of Arizona.
What is the Spanish Golden Age?
The Spanish Golden Age lasted from the 15th to the 17th centuries, during which time Spain was one of the wealthiest countries in the world and arts and literature flourished. This period of Spanish dominance began after 1492, when Spanish Christians reconquest Spain from the Moors and sponsored Christopher Columbus' journey across the Atlantic, securing Spain's power in the New World. It faded as the Spanish Habsburgs lost power and Spain lost a succession of wars, including wars with the Netherlands and England. It was during this time that Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, and buildings such as the Palace of Charles V and El Escorial were constructed. Also at this time, significant Spanish painters such as El Greco, Diego Velázquez, Francisco de Zurbarán, Bartolomé Murillo, and José de Ribera were active.
How did Brunelleschi build the dome of the Florence Cathedral?
As civic projects boomed in the wealthy city of Florence, architects imagined building a huge dome on top of the Florence Cathedral as a way of glorifying their city. Though he had lost the Baptista doors design competition earlier, Filippo Brunelleschi was hired to build the dome, which needed to be 138 feet across, bigger than the Pantheon in Rome. It was not an easy task, and Brunelleschi was only 24 years old at the time. After studying Roman ruins, including the Pantheon, Brunelleschi built an octagonal double-shell dome. The inner layer of bricks was arranged in ever-tapering circular rows, which allowed each row of bricks to support the next. The bricks of the outer shell were arranged in a strong herringbone pattern. The 8 sides of the dome were further supported by ribs and metal bands. Brunelleschi faced another significant challenge: how were the workers going to build this thing? Usually, a dome would be constructed with the aid of scaffolding. but the space to be covered was so big that no trees were long enough. Instead, Brunelleschi devised a system of smaller scaffolds and platforms for workers, along with hoisting systems, and even elevated canteens so that workers could take their lunch break without climbing back down to the ground. It is no wonder that Brunelleschi is considered to be the father of Renaissance architecture.
Why is art so expensive?
This is essentially a question about the value of art as well as taste, which are not fixed. Artists and styles of art fall in and out of favor regularly, affecting a work's price and status. Paintings by Renaissance artist Sandro Botticelli were not always held in particularly high regard, from his death in the early 16th century until the mid-19th century. Botticelli's art was for the most part ignored by collectors and forgotten. As the 19th century art-buying elite rediscovered his work, its value went up dramatically. Botticelli's paintings are now amongst the most prized examples of Italian Renaissance art. In another example, Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh only achieved critical success after his death at age 37. Van Gogh's highly sought-after work now sells for millions of dollars.
What does it mean if a work of art is representational?
A representational work of art is one that realistically depicts objects from the real world. For example, 17th-century Dutch still lifes are representational, as these paintings feature realistic images of everyday objects.
What is sound art?
Also known as audio art, sound art developed in the late 1970s. Though artists and musicians had been experimenting with sound and electronic music for decades prior. Sound art, like video art, is a medium rather than a style, and features many different types of sounds from natural to man-made. The Italian artist Luigi Russolo, 1883–1947, wrote a manifesto titled The Art of Noises in 1913. Using new musical instruments as well as music comprised of noise sounds. Also in 1913, artist Marcel Duchamp created the Erratum musical, and later Yves Klein wrote the Monotone Symphony, 1947, which was composed of only one note. There are a number of sound artists, and visual artists who incorporate sound, working today, including the British artist Brian Eno, 1948, who collaborated with the artist Peter Schmidt to create an artwork called Oblique Strategies, Over 100 Worthwhile Dilemmas, 1975. Oblique Strategies is a set of cards designed to assist in solving difficult dilemmas that arise during life and creative work, such as writing a musical composition. Sound art is still in its infancy, and new audio and digital technology continues to develop and impact the medium.
What is the Aztec calendar stone?
Like the Mayans, the Aztec were deeply interested in calendars, which were linked to concepts of creation. The Aztec calendar stone, c. 1502 to 1520, is large, over 11 feet in diameter and over 25 tons. Also called the sunstone, the carved stone emphasizes the Aztec concept of cyclical time and reflects the Aztecs' cosmology and mythology. At the center of the stone is an image of the creature Alin, its tongue in the shape of a knife. Also depicted on the stone are the first 4 suns and the bodies of 2 fire gods, according to Aztec tradition. The monumental carving is not exactly a marker of time, though there are markings that indicate the 20-day Aztec calendar, and the date of the birth of the current, 5th, sun. The stone was excavated in the center of Mexico City, which now lies at the heart of the former Aztec Empire, the city of Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan was considered the birthplace of the 5th and current sun, and was the political center of the empire. Although the meaning of the Aztec calendar stone remains mysterious, its image continues to influence modern Mexican art and culture.
Who was Amelia Pélez?
Amelia Pélez, 1896 to 1968. Was an important Cuban artist whose modernist paintings visually explore Cuban identity. Pélez studied art in both Cuba and Paris, where she was inspired by Cubism and Constructivism, especially the work of Russian artist Alexandra Ixter. Her paintings are flat and boldly colored, with black outlines, and are reminiscent of the tropical climate of Cuba. During her later career, Pélez worked on ceramics and murals. Examples of her work include Mar Pacifico, Hibiscus, 1943, Nina con Paloma, Girl with a Dove, 1947, and numerous untitled works and sculptures.
What is the difference between an art museum and an art gallery?
The major difference between a museum and a gallery is that while each is a place that displays art, that art is usually for sale in a gallery but not in a museum. Both museums and galleries play an important civic role in the sharing of art and cultural ideas. Slightly complicating things, however, is that the term art gallery can also refer to a room or a series of rooms in a museum. When walking through an art museum such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, one might notice that rooms are referred to as galleries.
What is Daoism?
Like Confucianism, Daoism, also spelled Taoism, is also considered to be both a religion and a philosophy, and is native to China. Daoist philosophy is more metaphysically focused than Confucianism, and emphasizes intuition and developing a harmonious relationship with nature. It is founded upon the teachings of two ancient philosophers named Laozi and Zhuangzi. The word Dao means the ultimate way and is symbolically linked to water. Water is yielding and moves gently around obstacles. But it is also strong, it can turn even the largest stones into sand.
What makes art good or bad?
If you've gone to see a movie with a friend and argued about whether the film you both just saw was either good or bad, you are familiar with the foundations of art criticism. Your friend might believe The Matrix is a groundbreaking film with profound themes and solid acting, while you might completely disagree. When the arguing has continued for hours after the closing credits, it will perhaps become apparent that nothing you can say about the awkward romance or flashy graphics will convince your friend of your opinion. In the end, you agree to disagree. The same is true when evaluating a work of art. When writing, critics think about the skill of the artist, technique, form, and meaning of a work, but in the end, everything is debatable. Duchamp's urinal, fountain, is not inherently good art or bad art. Some critics believe it is profound while others write it off as a stunt. Arguing about whether it is good or bad is not only part of the fun of art appreciation, but is an integral part of art historical scholarship.
What is an illuminated manuscript?
An illuminated manuscript is an illustrated book, and was one of the most important forms of art in medieval Europe and elsewhere, including the Islamic Empire. During the early Middle Ages, European illuminated manuscripts were an important part of Christian missionary activities, and Christian monasteries were at the heart of manuscript production. Specially trained monks, called scribes, wrote text on two different types of animal skin: vellum and parchment, as paper was not common until the 15th century. Medieval illuminators supplemented the text with colorful decoration, often designing large initials and full-color illustrations that took up an entire page. Illuminated manuscripts were very labor-intensive and expensive. The ink alone was worth as much as a semi-precious stone, and sometimes gold leaf was used in the decoration. Manuscripts were sometimes protected with expensive, jewel-encrusted covers, such as the cover of the Lindau Gospels.
What are some of the challenges in studying ancient African art?
Africa is a vast continent with significant variations in geography and culture. African art can include sculpture, pottery, jewelry, rock painting, textiles, and architecture, among other forms. Much of African art was made from perishable materials, though stone and metal were also common media, and was meant to either be used in religious ceremonies, or was meant to be worn. Most African art is neither labeled nor signed by the artist. Many objects have been discovered accidentally and therefore without any context. Though there is some documentation, in general, ancient Africa lacks a written record as religious and cultural traditions were transmitted orally from one generation to the next. And this can make it difficult for scholars to contextualize, and even confidently date, the ancient art that has been found. One of the most significant problems is illegal excavation and the selling of sensitive objects on the black market. This results in the often irretrievable loss of important information about a work of art. Similar challenges face art historians studying art from other parts of the world, including, but certainly not limited to, the Pacific and the Americas.
What is minimalism?
Minimalism is a term that describes simple, geometric art that is often impersonal and made with a new set of materials, including aluminum, plexiglass, plywood, and steel. Minimalist artists attempted to distill their work into a pure form, editing any reference to personality, feelings, symbolism, or story. The style became popular during the mid-1960s, though many art critics at the time accused minimalism of being too cold, and questioned whether art could, or should, be produced by industrial means. The term minimalism has been used to describe the art of many artists. From Ad Reinhardt to Yves Klein, Frank Stella to Robert Rauschenberg. The work of artist Donald Judd, 1928 to 1994, is a good example of minimalism. Judd explored the difference between painting and sculpture with his series of wall structures. Judd's wall structures are composed of a series of machinematic rectangular forms that protrude from the wall. Forms that he called specific objects. The work of artist Anne Truitt, 1921 to 2004, occasionally blurred the line between minimalism and color field painting. However, her minimalist sculpture Grant, 1963, a long wooden beam, painted in acrylic, was a pure, impersonal, geometric form.
Why was Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon so important?
Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907, was significant because it shocked the early 20th century art world and foreshadowed Cubism and other forms of 20th century modernism. The large painting, 7.9 x 7.6 feet, depicts a group of nude prostitutes with large, almond-shaped eyes, disjointed poses, and mask-like faces. The painting was radical for its subject matter as well as its incorporation of African style, especially on such a large scale. The painting was not necessarily a critical success, and even Picasso's friends found it to be ugly. However, the artist Georges Braque, 1882–1963, saw the painting and was inspired by its broken lines and geometric dissolution of form. Demoiselles d'Avignon inspired Braque to experiment with a style that would be known as Cubism. One of the most significant revolutions in modern art.
Who was Pablo Picasso?
Pablo Picasso, 1881–1973, is perhaps one of the most famous modern artists of all time. Born in Spain, he produced thousands of works of art during his lifetime, and is known for his artistic genius and avant-garde innovations. Picasso was a painter and a sculptor and experimented with collage, mixed media, and sculptural assemblages. He is credited with developing Cubism, along with fellow Cubist and fierce competitor Georges Braque. He helped to popularize non-Western art, and he experimented with symbolism, expressionism, classicism, surrealism, and more. Like many of the great artists described by Giorgio Vasari in the Lives of the Artists, Picasso's talent was discovered at a young age by his father, also an artist. He began formal artistic training as a young boy and was admitted to the School of Fine Arts in Barcelona at 14 years old. During his studies at this school and others, he copied the work of the great masters, and then later began to socialize with avant-garde circles of artists and thinkers. Picasso's work features a range of styles, media, and forms, and is therefore categorized into periods, including the early Blue Period. During Picasso's Blue Period, he painted The Guitar Player, 1910. A melancholy portrait of a social outcast playing the guitar with long, bony fingers. After the Blue Period was Picasso's so-called Rose Period, during which his work became brighter, more delicate, and more varied in color. Work from Picasso's Rose Period includes The Family of Saltimbanques, 1905. A painting that depicts a group of traveling acrobats appearing lost in a desolate landscape. One of Picasso's most important paintings is Guernica, 1937. A monumental work inspired by atrocities committed by Spain's far-right political party, the Falange, which was responsible for bombing the Basque city of Guernica, killing nearly 2,000 people. The painting's dimensions reach nearly 12 x 25 feet. It is a mass of complex imagery and swooping, disjointed human and animal figures in monochrome. Guernica was exhibited at the Exposition Universelle, World's Fair, in Paris in 1937. and has since become so famous that its political impact has been upstaged by its importance as a visual masterpiece.
What is Paleolithic art?
In Greek, palea means old and lithos means stone. Paleolithic art is therefore Artei created during the Old Stone Age, which lasted from about 35,000 to 8,000 BCE. During the last Ice Age, the Paleolithic period was characterized by the human use of stone tools. People of this period were migratory hunter-gatherers who sought shelter near rocks and caves. Art of this time is the oldest ever discovered, and fascinating examples include cave paintings, rock paintings, and stone sculpture.
How are the landscapes of Constable and Turner different?
John Constable, 1776 to 1837, and Joseph Mallard William Turner, 1776 to 1851, were both successful British landscape painters. And yet their styles and approaches to nature were almost completely opposite. After spending some time training at the Royal Academy School in London, but disliking academic convention, Constable dedicated himself to studying nature and searching for truth in his home village of East Bergholt, in the Suffolk countryside. In an attempt to garner respect for landscape painting, Constable's canvases were very large. His painting, The Haywain, Landscape, Noon, 1821, is over 6 feet long, for example. His paintings are clear, detailed, and infused with emotion, which is expressed in heavy clouds, reflective ponds, and glistening foliage, usually calm and pristine. Constable's landscapes offer a subjective image of the manicured English countryside. By comparison, Turner's landscapes are a whirlwind of drama and dissolved images, and present nature as an overwhelming power capable of consuming man and his impermanent structures. Turner is known for his enormous oil paintings, as well as innovations in watercolor, particularly the borderline abstraction of his sweeping brush strokes. Turner's paintings were shocking at the time. His 1842 painting Snowstorm, Steamer Off a Harbor's Mouth, for example, depicts a ferocious ocean storm within which the actual steamer is barely visible, and it is nearly impossible to differentiate between the swirl of dark clouds and the thrusts of the thrashing waves. Unlike Constable's careful, controlled nature, Turner's is a monster.
What is architecture?
Famed modern architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe stated, "Architecture starts when you carefully put two bricks together." Architecture is the art, or science, of designing buildings. and the study of architecture is the study of the built environment. Examples of architecture can range from the small, such as a craftsman-style bungalow in California, to the very big, like the 108-story Willis Tower in Chicago. Architecture can also be very old. For example, Scarabray, a Neolithic fishing village in northern Scotland, is thousands of years old. Whereas the undulating metal of Frank Gehry's Disney Concert Hall was finished in 2003. There are many different architectural styles and building systems throughout history, and throughout the globe. The study of architecture is an important part of art history.
What is a fang ding?
A fangding is a square or rectangular vessel with 4 legs and is an example of ritual bronze made during the Shang dynasty, one of China's earliest dynasties, c. 1700 to 211-38 BCE. Bronze vessels like the fangding were associated with ancient Chinese shamanism and were used to hold food and wine offerings during religious ceremonies. Many fangding have been found in royal tombs. The largest vessel discovered weighs over 240 pounds. They were often decorated with intricate animal and geometric motifs.
What is the Taj Mahal?
The Taj Mahal, in Agra, India, is one of the most recognizable structures around the world. With its white onion-shaped domes, arched windows, and long reflective pool. The Taj Mahal is made of marble, inlaid with colorful stones in a floral pattern, and also decorated with calligraphy inscriptions from the Quran. It is not a palace, but a mausoleum built by the 17th century Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, grandson of Akbar the Great, for his third wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Monumental tombs were part of an Islamic tradition, and the design of the Taj Mahal mirrors the design of garden pavilions in Iran. It evokes a sense of calm and serenity through its symmetrical and balanced forms, and expansive pools and tall minarets. The building is symbolically linked to descriptions of gardens in paradise from the Quran and is considered a masterpiece of Indo-Islamic architecture.
What is a genre painting?
A genre painting, particularly popular in the Netherlands, is a realistic depiction of normal scenes from everyday life. Genre paintings eschew idealism and fantasy, and contrast with other popular forms such as religious and mythological paintings. 17th century Dutch artists such as Johannes Vermeer, 1632 to 1675, Jan Steen, 1626 to 1679, and Peter de Hooch, c. 1629 to 1684, are examples of famous genre painters.
What is the Ionic order?
The Ionic order is the second of the three classical Greek architectural orders and is characterized by a longer, leaner column than the Doric order. Ionic columns were built with a ratio of approximately 9:1 and the capital at the top of the column is 46 shaped like an unfurling scroll, which is called a volute. The Temple of Athena Nike, located on the Acropolis in Athens and built between 427 and 424 BCE, is an example of an Ionic temple. This small building was only about 27 by 19 feet and it was completely demolished by invading Turks during the 17th century, though it was later rebuilt. The temple is famous for its two porches on each end, and for a surviving fragment of relief sculpture known as Athena Nike adjusting her sandal. This elegant image shows the goddess wearing a long, flowing robe which clings gently to her body as she bends to adjust her shoe. Her robe slips off of one shoulder and she appears momentarily vulnerable. A delicate and erotic image of the goddess.
What is Vanitas painting?
Vanitas paintings were popular in Dutch and Spanish still life painting during the 17th century. They are symbolic of beauty, material luxury, and the brevity of life. In Harmensteenix 1640 an allegory of the vanities of human life. The artist depicts a tabletop covered with a jumble of trinkets and various objects, illuminated by a powerful beam of light entering into the frame from the upper left. The items on the table include a skull, oil lamp, musical instruments, a watch, a sword, a seashell, and books. Luxury items such as the sword and the exotic shell represent wealth and material possessions. Other items, such as the skull, oil lamp, and timepiece, serve as a memento mori, or a reminder of death. Other common symbols found in Vanitas paintings include candles, flowers, exotic fruit, and hourglasses.
How did the Bauhaus influence America?
Many important German artists, architects, and designers fled the country during the rise of the Nazis and emigrated to America, where they achieved great success. Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus School, left Nazi Germany in 1934 and joined the faculty at Harvard University, where he founded the Architects Collaborative, a modernist group that emphasized collaboration and created the design for the Clark Art Institute building in Williamstown, Massachusetts. In Chicago, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy directed the new Bauhaus, which lasted until 1938, and later went on to open the School of Design, which was then incorporated into the Illinois Institute of Technology, IIT. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was head of IIT's architecture department and designed Crown Hall, a masterpiece of modern architecture.
What is the Nefertiti bust?
Nefertiti was the queen of the pharaoh Akhenaten who ruled during the Amarna period, c. 1349 to 1336 BCE. When the bust was discovered in 1912, by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, it immediately captivated both scholars and the public. The painted limestone bust emphasizes the grace and elegance of Nefertiti's face and neck. She appears to be wearing makeup, particularly around the eyes and lips. Her unique blue crown is decorated with a geometric pattern. The sculpture is a testament to the fact that Nefertiti is often considered to be one of the most beautiful women of the ancient world.
Who was Master Gislibertus?
Although most medieval artisans created their work anonymously, the name of one key sculptor is widely known, that of Master Gislibertus, who worked in the first half of the 12th century. Gislibertus worked on a number of architectural projects throughout medieval France and Burgundy, but is most well known for his contributions to the sculptural decoration of the Cathedral of Saint-Lazare in Autun, France. Graceful, elongated figures and a unique compositional balance characterize his work, which often appeared in tympanums and historiated capitals.
What is mobiliary art?
Paleolithic art can be broken down into two general categories, mobiliary and parietal art. As Paleolithic people were migratory, they needed to carry their belongings with them as they traveled great distances. Mobiliary is a term that describes mobile art, or art that can be carried without too much physical effort. The most common examples include small sculptures.
What is the Palace of Knossos?
The mysterious Minoan culture is famous for the labyrinthine Palace of Knossos, discovered on the island of Crete in 1900 by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans. Evans called his discovery the Palace of Minos, referring to the mythological maze which imprisoned the Minotaur. The Knossos Palace complex contained hundreds of rooms of various sizes and shapes, including storerooms, workrooms, and administrative rooms. One storeroom was so large it could hold over 20,000 gallons of oil in jars. While the layout of the palace appears disjointed and confusing, each space was designed to have access to fresh air and plumbing, and was elaborately decorated with wall paintings and frescoes. The palace appears to have been completely destroyed and rebuilt, and Minoan culture seems to have been severely disrupted by at least one major natural disaster, possibly a catastrophic earthquake or volcanic eruption or both.
What does postmodern architecture look like?
Postmodern architecture is not necessarily a style, but an approach, therefore. Postmodern buildings will not necessarily look like one another, but may share some characteristics. One of the key postmodern architects is Robert Venturi, 1925. A Philadelphia-born architect who believed that the urban environment was too complex to be uniform. In 1966, he wrote Complexity and Contradiction, where he responded to modernist architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's statement, "Less is more," by declaring less is a bore. Venturi's architectural style is infused with various architectural styles from history. A good example is the Vanna Venturi house, completed in 1964 and built for the architect's mother. The Vanna Venturi house is at once complex and simple, serious and playful. It has a solid foundation and an angled roof, and evokes a sense of the traditional farmhouse but not quite. This ethereal lack of uniformity is characteristic of postmodernism. Frank Gehry is also a well-known postmodern architect who built the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, which opened in 2003, and the Guggenheim Museum of Modern Art in Bilbao, Spain, in 1997. His work is often constructed of highly polished stainless steel made up of distorted planes that form a complex, curvilinear design, a chaotic style that can be described as deconstructivist.
What is the Venus of Willendorf?
Also referred to as simply the Woman of Willendorf, this prehistoric Venus is a small sculpture. An example of mobiliary art, discovered in Willendorf, Austria, and was made in approximately 22,000 BCE, found in 1908, its given name is ironic. Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, is usually depicted as thin, graceful, and lovely. The Venus of Willendorf, by contrast, is short, less than 5 inches high, and obese. She has no discernible face, only what seems to be a pattern of braided hair. Her sexuality and fertility is emphasized through an exaggeration of her female features, while other figurative elements have been minimized. Her arms are very small and her legs taper dramatically. The work's small size and defined features suggest it was designed to be held and touched. Debate continues as to whether the sculpture depicts a real person, or is a symbol for fertility and health. It would seemingly be difficult to achieve such a body type during the lean years of the Ice Age. The Venus of Willendorf's obesity, while playfully mocked in the early 20th century by those who discovered her, was likely highly valued as an omen of prehistoric health and survival at the time of its creation. Hundreds of similar sculptures have been found.
What is the difference between the work of Hokusai and Hiroshige?
Katsushika Hokusai, 1760 to 1849, and Yutagawa Hiroshige, 1797 to 1858, were two of the most successful landscape painters in 19th century Japan. And their prints are among the most recognizable examples of graphic art in the world. Both artists explored the transience of the material world in their ukiyo-e paintings. Hokusai was especially well known for his series, 36 Views of Mount Fuji. His print, The Great Wave off Kanagawa, represents a monumental wave cresting with stylized foam, about to crash near a group of men in long, graceful boats shaped to mirror the curves of the ocean swells. Appearing unexpectedly in the background is the distant image of snow-capped Mount Fuji, which lies low along the horizon line. The white peak of Mount Fuji looks similar to a white-capped swell in the foreground, making the formidable mountain appear as temporary as an ocean wave. The Great Wave is an example of Hokusai's use of the European color, Prussian blue, and demonstrates the simplicity and dynamism of Japanese art during the Edo period. Like Hokusai, Hiroshige was a master of the Edo period who specialized in landscapes. Some of his prints also include images of Mount Fuji, including view of Mount Fuji from Sata Point in the Tsuruga Bay. 1589, a woodcut that depicts a curling wave similar to the one painted by Hokusai. Hiroshige was almost 40 years younger than Hokusai, and was greatly inspired by the older artist's work. Among his most famous works were his prints for the series 100 Views of Edo, 1856 to 1859, which were completed by his student, Hiroshige II. His prints often rely on an understanding of perspective to create depth, and his style had a major impact on Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh, who created an oil painting based on a Hashi bridge. In the Rain in 1887. Hiroshige street scenes in prints such as Night View of Sarawakamaki, 1856. Also inspired Impressionist artists such as Auguste Renoir and Camille Pissarro. Hiroshige was working in Japan at a time when the country was opening its doors to the outside world after centuries of isolation. And his work captures the changes occurring in the 19th century through a lens of the ukiyo-e tradition.
What is the difference between warm and cool colors?
Warm colors, including hues such as red, yellow, and orange, are energetic colors associated with fire. Warm colors are sometimes referred to as advancing colors as they draw the eye forward. By contrast, cool colors, such as blue, green, and violet, are also known as retreating colors because they seem to withdraw. Artists manipulate combinations of warm and cool colors to make visually engaging images. Artists can also manipulate the warmth of a color by changing its value.
Why is this not a pipe?
René Magritte's The Treachery, or Perfidy, of Images, 1928–1929. Is a highly realistic oil painting of a tobacco pipe with the word Ceci n'est pas un pipe, this is not a pipe. Painted below.
What are the plastered skulls of Jericho?
The people of Neolithic Jericho buried their dead under the floors of their houses in a practice interpreted as a form of ancestor worship. While complete bodies were often buried. Sometimes the head was removed and carefully reconstructed using colored plaster. Red and black paint was used to mimic facial features and shells, such as cowries, were used to create white eyes. The result was a lifelike representation of the deceased, and the practice has been considered by some scholars to be one of the earliest examples of portrait making. Similar examples of plastered skulls have been found at other sites across the Near East.
Why does art from the Amarna period look so different from other Egyptian art?
During the New Kingdom, a ruler named Amenophis IV broke away from the traditional religious values of Egypt and focused his worship on a single god, the sun god, Aten. In order to honor Aten, he changed his name to Akhenaten. This pharaoh not only broke away from religious customs, but artistic customs as well. Much of the art made during his reign features the god Aten, depicted as a sun disk with linear rays emanating from it. Each ray has a small hand, often pointing down towards Akhenaten, which represents divine blessing. Images showing Akhenaten, such as a limestone relief featuring the ruler and his wife, Nefertiti, are unusual in that the pharaoh is not traditionally idealized. He looks almost ugly, in fact, with a protruding chin and long, thin body. In the relief, he is shown sitting with Nefertiti, playing with their children. It is a warm, family scene that is quite different from conventional pharaonic works from periods both before and after.
What is vorticism?
Vorticism was a brief but powerful artistic and literary movement that developed in England before World War I. In 1914, the editor of a magazine called Blast, Wyndham Lewis, founded vorticism, but its name was coined by the American expatriate poet, Ezra Pound. Lewis explained the movement when he wrote, "At the heart of a whirlpool is a great silent place where all the energy is concentrated. And there, at the point of concentration, is the vorticist," quoted in Dempsey 111. The goal was to create a uniquely British response to Cubism, Futurism, and Expressionism. and make energetic art that reflected the jarring realities of modern life in the early 20th century. Visual art representative of vorticism includes Lewis composition, 1913. A dynamic rectilinear abstraction, and a vortographic photo image of Ezra Pound by Alvin Langdon Coburn in 1917. The vortiscope was a process invented by Coburn, who attached a series of mirrors to a camera lens to create pictures with multiple layers.
What movies have been made about famous artists?
Artists have been inspiring films for decades. The following is a short list of movies either about or inspired by artists. Exit Through the Gift Shop. 2010, an intriguing documentary about the enigmatic street artist Banksy. Little Ashes. 2008, Robert Pattinson plays Salvador Dali in a film about the artist's relationships with filmmaker Luis Buñuel and writer Federico Garcia Lorca. Factory Girl, 2006. A dramatic look at Edie Sedgwick's relationship with Andy Warhol. Klimt. 2006, John Malkovich plays the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Modigliani, 2004. A dramatic romance that focuses on the rivalry between artists Modigliani and Picasso in Paris. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, 2003. A film inspired by a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was in turn inspired by the famous painting by Jan Vermeer. Frida. 2002, Salma Hayek and Alfred Molina star as Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, respectively. Pollock, 2000. Starring Ed Harris as abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Marcia Gay Harden won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Lee Krasna. Goya in Bordeaux. 1999, a dramatic Spanish-language film about the artist Francisco de Goya. Surviving Picasso. 1996, Anthony Hopkins stars as Pablo Picasso in this film about the women in his life. Basquiat. 1996, a biopic of the postmodernist artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I Shot Andy Warhol. 1996, Lily Taylor stars as Valerie Solanese, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968. Vincent and Theo, 1990. Robert Altman directs this film about the relationship between brothers Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. Camille Claudel. 1988, a French film about sculptor Camille Claudel and her relationship with Auguste Rodin. Auberai, 1986. Donald Sutherland plays French artist Paul Gauguin.
Who was Lady Murasaki?
Lady Murasaki was a Heianera lady-in-waiting in the court of Empress Consort Taishi. She was a celebrated poet and novelist and wrote the Tale of Genji, considered to be the world's first novel. While Chinese was the official language of scholarship in Korea and Japan, the Tale of Genji was written in Japanese. At 54 chapters, the work included over 400 characters. and told the story of the 84 love affairs of Prince Genji and life at court. 20 chapters of Lady Murasaka's The Tale of Genji survive as illustrated scrolls. Likely completed by a team of artists, including a calligrapher. The paintings are muted and refined, with an architectural focus. Figures can be seen indoors from above using a technique of representing invisible, blown-away roofs. Both the novel and the images make a connection between human emotion and nature, and reflect Buddhist ideas of fleeting earthly pleasures.
What is video art?
While artists such as Andy Warhol had experimented with film and video recordings, video art was born in 1965 when Fluxus artist Nam June Paik filmed the streets of New York City with his brand new Sony portable video camera and showed the videos mere hours later at a cafe. Video art, which is a medium, not a style, in the way that oil painting is a medium, represents a transition from mass media influence to television influence. Video art can take many forms, from use in sculpture and installations, to performances, and videos can be broadcast live or recorded and displayed in various settings. In 1996, Douglas Gordon won the British Turner Prize for his video work 24-Hour Psycho, 1996. Contemporary video artists include Bill Viola, 1951, Matthew Barney, 1967. Creator of the Cremaster film series, and Canadian Stan Douglas, 1960, among many others.
What are the main characteristics of Romanesque architecture?
Romanesque architecture is notable for its use of round arches, military strength, and exterior architectural sculpture, the latter having fallen out of favor in Europe during earlier centuries. Romanesque buildings rely on thick walls, barrel vaults, and strong piers for structural support, allowing room for relatively small windows. As Europe was a culturally and politically fragmented landscape during the medieval period, Romanesque architectural styles vary greatly depending on the geographic region. For example, at first glance the Church of Saint-Sernin in Toulouse, France, might not look much like the Pisa Cathedral in Italy, but these 11th century examples are both considered Romanesque due to their use of round arches, thick walls, cruciform structure, and exterior sculptural detail.
What is Romanticism?
Romanticism was an intellectual, cultural, and artistic movement that went against the rationalism of the Enlightenment and instead emphasized emotion and subjectivity. Romanticism developed in the mid-18th century and remained popular until well into the mid-19th century. It coincided with neoclassicism, and some neoclassical art is even considered romantic. because of its frequent idealism and nostalgia for the past. During the Romantic period, there was a new interest in medieval literature, art, and architecture. Inspiring Gothic revival, which was particularly popular in British domestic architecture. Romanticism transcends the visual arts and includes music and literature as well. Both Beethoven and Chopin are considered part of the Romantic movement, as are Victor Hugo, William Wordsworth, Herman Melville, and Edgar Allan Poe. Romantic painters include Thomas Gainsborough, William Blake, Francisco Goya, Theodore Géricault, Eugene Delacroix, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, John Constable, Joseph Mallard, William Turner, and the artists of the Hudson River School, among others.
What are the sappy salt cellars?
Sappy salt cellars, made of ivory, were a result of Portuguese trade relationships with artists along the coast of West Africa. The Portuguese commissioned luxury goods such as spoons, forks, decorative boxes, and salt cellars. At the time, salt was itself a luxury good that only the rich could afford. And an exotic, carved salt cellar was a symbol of wealth. Art historians have identified what they think are three individual sappy carvers who produced much of the work. The styles of the salt cellars are a blend of African and Portuguese influence, mixing Christian imagery and European hunting scenes with royal iconography familiar within the Benin art historical tradition. In a way, the sappy salt cellars are the first example of tourist art in Africa, as these were objects created with the intention of exporting them.
What is a buy disc?
Although these circular pendants look like they could be worn as jewelry, they are much too bulky and heavy for such a purpose. Instead, they were likely used in ritual worship of the sky. Bi, pronounced B, discs were made of nephrite, a greenish stone similar to jade. Some were smooth, displaying only traces of the tool marks used to shape them, while others were elaborately decorated. A Bai disc from the Zhou dynasty, 1100 to 221 BCE, was discovered in a tomb near Luoyang, China, and is intricately carved with dragons. The ancient Chinese regarded dragons as symbols of power who were thought to pass between heaven and earth and to bring rain. It would have taken many hours of difficult work to grind and polish the dragons and other abstract designs on the Zhou Bai disc.
What is the difference between a shogun, a daimyo, and a samurai?
From the 12th century until the 19th century, Japan was a feudal society controlled by a powerful ruler, called a shogun. The shogun maintained power over his large territory. The daimyo, a Japanese word meaning great names, were feudal landowners equivalent to medieval European lords. The daimyo commanded the samurai, a distinct class of swordsmen trained to be devoted to the shogun.
What was the Ashken school?
The Ashken School was a loosely affiliated group of American realist artists made up of some members of the Eight, including Robert Henry, William Glackens, George Lux, Everett Shinn, and John Sloan. The painter George Bellows, 1882–1925, is also associated with the Ashken School. Like the Impressionists, the artists of the Ashken School were interested in scenes of everyday American life, though they tended towards darker themes. Paintings such as John Sloan's Election Night, 1907, and George Bellows' Cliff Dwellers, 1913, feature bold colors and seemingly spontaneous energy as large groups of people fill the frame. The Ashken School is considered the first modern American art movement.
What are the hallmarks of the Venetian Renaissance?
During the Renaissance, the Republic of Venice was one of the most powerful city-states in Italy. Geographically and culturally removed from cities such as Rome and Florence, which were much further south, art in Venice was greatly inspired by Northern Europe and the East, including Islamic and Persian styles from the Ottoman Empire, formerly the Byzantine Empire. The climate in Venice was also different from other Italian cities. As the city itself was mostly water, Venice is essentially a series of islands connected by canals. It was too humid for fresco painting. Venetian painters preferred to work in oil paint, using bold colors such as deep reds, blues, and golds inspired by the East. Venetian artists also continued to make intricate mosaics in the Byzantine style, and the city's architecture featured arches and domes more reminiscent of the East than the rest of Italy.
Who was Bernini?
The art of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, 1598–1680, defines Baroque style. Bernini was primarily a sculptor, but he also worked as an architect, painter, and poet. His sculpture is exceptionally naturalistic, it lives, breathes, and occasionally screams with life. Bernini was a charismatic player in the upper echelons of Rome's high society who was famous by age 20. He was patronized by popes and aristocrats and was known for his cool confidence. Some of his highest profile commissions include the design for the Baldacchino, a bronze canopy in St. Peter's Basilica, and the Ecstasy of St. Teresa, a marble sculpture in Santa Maria della Vittoria in Rome. Bernini experienced a hiccup in his success when his part of the redesign for the Faggade of St. Peter's cathedral proved a failure, but his design for the piazza is hailed as an architectural masterpiece.
What is the Narmer palette?
The Narmer palette, c. 2950 to 2775 BCE, is one of the most important examples of Egyptian art. The shield-like palette was made from a material called greensist, and depicts a king identified as Narmer, but is possibly the ruler Menes, who was celebrated for uniting the lands of Egypt under his rule. The story is told through a combination of hieroglyphic writing and imagery. On one side of the palette, Narmer is the largest figure depicted. An example of Egyptian art's use of the hieratic scale, the pharaoh's large size indicates his importance. His hand is raised above his head, about to strike an enemy with a club. The opposite side features the headless bodies of Narmer's enemies. Watched over by Horus, the falcon god of the sky. In a lower register, the cat-like animals have their necks intertwined. All in all, the imagery of the palette serves to proclaim the strength of Narmer, and represents the unification of the lands of Egypt.
What is the Ishtar Gate?
The Ishtar Gate was a Neo-Babylonian, double-arched gateway with 4 towers, each featuring notched walls known as crenellations. The Ishtar Gate was originally over 40 feet tall, and the towers rose to nearly 100 feet. The deep blue brick structure was decorated with stylized lions and palm trees, an impressive fortification indeed. The monumental gate mirrored the wealth and extravagance of other Babylonian structures such as the Hanging Gardens, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A reconstruction of the Ishtar Gate has been installed in a museum in Berlin, Germany.
What is Confucianism?
Confucianism is considered to be both a philosophy and a religion, and is native to China. It is named for Confucius, a scholar born in 551 BCE, whose teachings form the foundation of the philosophy. Confucianism is concerned with the relationship between people in society, including relationships with ancestors and even the emperor. The virtue of human-heartedness, called Ren, is key to being a junzi, or gentleman. During the Han Dynasty, 206 BC-E-220 CE, Confucianism became the official religion of the state and had a major impact on Chinese art and culture.